All right, now the next sort of task we're going to tackle here is getting bricks on the lower part of our building, and that means diving back into a little bit of MASH. Now, the first thing I want to do here is separate the upper portion of my house from the lower portion of the house because that is the portion that I want to obviously add bricks to. I don't want bricks going all the way up here because this is a wooden part of the house, and I want my bricks to only be on the lower sort of stone part of the building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my front view here, and I'm going to add in a edge loop right around here where that board is. I'm going to go into face mode and select all the faces here. And then I'm going to go to edit mesh, extract. And essentially what this will do is separate the lower portion of my house from the upper portion of my house. The extract function is very powerful. I use it for a lot of things. So just be mindful that that is there. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this side of the house as well. I'm going to grab my multi-cut tool and add in an edge loop there. Go into my face mode, grab those faces, and go to edit mesh and extract. And then I'll have my two lower portions of the house and two upper portions of the house separated. Actually, it doesn't look like it's separated this one, so we'll try it again. Face mode, select faces, edit mesh, extract. There we go. Now I want to combine the two upper portions of the house. So I'm going to shift select both of those and then go to edit mesh or mesh combine. And then I'm going to do the same for the lower portion of my house. Select both of those, go to mesh combine. I will rename this to main house upper and main house lower. Now, one thing I want to do here is this sort of side portion of the house goes in quite a ways to the interior of the inside here. And I don't really need this, so I'm just going to sort of clean this up a little bit. And while I'm at it, I'm going to try to get rid of some of these individual shingles as well. Since they're not going to be seen, you don't need them. So I'm going to go to my vertex mode. And I'm just going to move that way in there like that. While I'm at it, I can also delete these sort of interior faces here that we're not going to see. Then I can grab these, kind of move those in. So I'm basically just trying to minimize areas that aren't seen, parts of the model that you're not going to see. That's basically just going to be wasted geometry if they're there. So I'm just trying to clean up a little bit here. So then we get to the point where how do we clean up all of these shingles in a way where we don't accidentally delete the other shingles? Well, luckily we still have them in individual groups, right? So I can hide the ones that I don't want. So I can go in and we'll hide these. Well, mainly we'll just hide this one here. So I'm going to do Control H to hide that. And then I'm going to jump into my front view and we'll look at this in wireframe. I'm going to use my marquee select here, my sort of lasso, and I'm just going to sort of lasso all of these shingles inside of the roof. You will select other things, but that is okay. And you want to make sure that you're only getting the shingles that you sort of want to delete. So you may need to sort of go in quite a bit further like that. You know, maybe something along the lines of that. I don't care about getting rid of all of them. But now what I can do is just deselect the things that I don't want to delete. It can be a little tedious. I believe there's a hotkey also where you can control shift to deselect some of these things. So then we can just look, make sure that we only have the shingles we want to get rid of selected, and then I can just delete those. And then I can kind of do the same thing for the shingles inside of here too. So I will unhide this group, and then I'll hide my other groups, Control H. And then I'm going to jump into my side view here, look at the wireframe. And then I'm just going to try to only select the shingles sort of like in this area right here. Right, now we can look at this in our perspective view to make sure that those are the only ones we have. And then I believe it's Control Shift. No, Control Alt Shift. That's not it either. So yeah, it's just Control. So we can just Control to deselect what we don't want to delete. So just Control Select. Now we'll deselect those. And then we can just delete those unseen shingles in there. Then I'll unhide the rest of my model, and then we can just sort of carry on. I am going to go ahead and go to Edit, Delete All by Type History, just to kind of clean my scene up a little bit. And then we can get started with our bricks. So I'm going to select this guy. Again, just double check, make sure that that has no history on it. Now my rocks here, just to show you, I just modeled a few different types of rocks. I tried to keep them all relatively square, or bricks, I guess you can call them. So 5 different bricks here. I tried to keep them all relatively square. Pretty basic. I just started with a cube. I duplicated that cube. You know, same method for creating these shingles. I beveled them all. I kind of made them all look a little bit different. And then we want to make sure that they're center of the grid. Again, this is very important before we turn anything into a mesh object. Center of the grid. Transforms are all zeroed out, and the history deleted. I will then select my first brick here and do create a mesh network. Now, if we look at the brick, we'll see that it's doing the normal thing, right? When you create a mesh, it just kind of repeats in the line. So I'm not too worried about that. The first thing I want to do is come to my attribute editor and look in my mesh distribute. And I want to change my mesh distribution type from linear to mesh. And then I'm going to, where it says input mesh here, I'm going to middle mouse drag my main house lower model into that input mesh value there. So main house lower, middle mouse drag into input mesh. And then we'll see some of our bricks just sort of hanging out there on the mesh for that house. We can go ahead and increase this value quite a bit. The one thing I want to do is turn off calculate rotation. Actually, I think I want to keep calculate rotation on. I just want to change the orientation of my brick itself. So what I'm going to do for that is a offset node. So I'm going to go to Mesh and create an offset node. And I want to offset this in not Z, probably in X. Nope, not X. In Y. Yeah, so I'm going to offset this at negative 90 degrees in my Y. And looks like we still have some on their side there, which we don't want. So let's jump back and say, basically what happens here is I'm just going to be playing around with the scene until I get something that looks kind of like what I'm aiming for. So I'm not too set on anything. There's no real method for this. I'm just sort of figuring things out as I go. I do want these to be sort of set inside a little bit more. So where this says push along normal, I'm actually going to give this a negative value. So we'll do something like negative 20. And then we can kind of tweak it from there. And then I just need my other bricks to populate in there as well. So I'm going to go to my repro node and go ahead and middle mouse drag those in to that slot. And then I can just hide those other bricks, Control H. And then I need an ID node. So it knows to sort of cycle through those other bricks. So I'm going to create an ID node and set that to random. And now we'll see all of the other bricks there appearing on my building. So I just want to go back to my distribute node, and I really want to increase how many bricks that we're seeing here. So I don't want too many. I don't think it's necessary for every little portion of the building to be covered with bricks. I do want there to be quite a few of them, though, because I do want it to look like a brick building, but I don't necessarily need every little piece of the building to look like it's covered with bricks. So let's try 1,500 for now. That's quite a few. And again, I'm constantly just sort of like playing around with settings to kind of get the result I want. I think use face area, that kind of gives me something that I like. Right, so I mean, a value of something like this is probably pretty good. Now I will need to edit this further. I will need to go in and sort of clean things up and move things around, get them out of the windows and things like that. But I think that's kind of what I'm looking for there. Now I do want to randomize them a little bit. So I'm going to add a random node. So I can randomize the position. Randomize. I don't want to randomize the rotation too much. It's okay if they're looking a little bit offset, but I don't want to get too crazy with the random rotation. Very lightly. And then same with the random scale. I do want to scale them randomly, but I don't want them to get too crazy. And I can also turn on this uniform scale. So basically they'll scale uniformly just based off of your X scale. So I think I might turn that on as well. So I think that's looking pretty good. I think that's kind of the look that I'm driving for here. So there is a good amount of them. And now again, I do need to go in and clean this up quite a bit. I'd try that normalize random setting just to see what that does. Yeah. We could try local. So yeah, you know, just completely experimental here. We can change the seeds, but I think that's kind of what we have there is kind of the situation that I am looking for here. Now, again, I'm going to clean this up further. I'm going to delete some things. I'm going to move some things around. Anything that's sticking out a little bit too far, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to delete anything that's sort of like in the way, like obviously that doesn't just look very realistic. So I will just do that really quick in like a quick time lapse. So you'll see me doing all this, and then we'll get back to the next step of the process. Oh, real quick. In order to make this to where we can edit them individually, we just need to delete the history on it. So it's no longer a mesh node, and we can separate them so they're all individual objects. So before that, I want to save my file because this could result in a crash. A lot of big processes you can do could result in a crash. This goes for any application. So you always want to save before you do any sort of big process. So I'm going to delete the history, and then I can just delete that mesh node. And then for this mesh repro mesh here, I'm going to go to mesh separate. This could take a few seconds. Okay, and then I can rename this group to bricks. Right? I'm going to go ahead and delete all by type history, again, just to keep my scene nice and clean. I'm going to select all of my bricks. My scene is a little bit chuggy at the moment, just because I have so many objects here, as you can see. So I'm going to select all of those bricks, and I want to make sure that their pivot points are centered on all of them, which will just make it a little bit easier to edit. So modify center pivot. And I just want to double check by clicking on one, make sure that their pivot points are centered. Now, to make life a little bit easier for me as I'm cleaning up, what I'm going to do is basically hide everything except for my wall and my bricks. So I will hide house upper. I'm going to hide the porch. I'm going to hide the end caps, shingles, basically everything except for my walls and my bricks. So a really easy way to get rid of a lot of these is just to jump into like my front view or side view here. And I'm just going to marquee select the very bottom, and this will get rid of anything that's just at the very bottom that's kind of poking through. So we can just go ahead and select those, hit delete, do the same thing for the top. Now for the top, I'm going to select down a little bit because we do have some boards and stuff at the very top of the house. So I don't want them to get really close, too close to the top of the house. So I'm going to select a lot of these on the top and then just shift deselect my, my house if I can. There we go. My house model there, the walls there. Just hit delete. The other thing I'm going to do is just kind of select anything sticking out a little bit too far and delete those. And I can do this from my front view, which I'm in now. And then I can jump into my side view and do that there as well. Okay. and yeah, so a lot of these, like in the corner, they're sticking out quite a bit in the corner. So I'm going to get rid of a lot of these guys that are just all sort of jutting out too much, I think, in my corners. So anything that's obviously just seems kind of out of place, I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. And it's important to save often when you get to this point, because at this point, we have so many objects in our scene. We literally have hundreds of objects in our scene. So when you're dealing with this large of a scene, it's kind of easy to get complacent, and if you do some certain actions, things will just get they'll kind of explode on you at times. So then I just want to go through and get everything out of the doorways and the windows. So if anything's kind of poking through a doorway or window, I'm just going to delete those. A lot of these down here, my stairs are down here, so we're not going to see these anyway. So yeah, I'm just going to go through and clean this up quite a bit, maybe move some around, and then we'll come back to you. All right, now once I've sort of cleaned it up a fair amount, I can begin turning things back on or unhiding things. And I'm just going to do this a little at a time and just make sure nothing is really directly interfering with some objects or some geometry that I already have. So, so yeah, just a little bit at a time, I'm going to begin unhiding things. Just to make sure they don't interfere. So for example, with my porch here, I may have quite a few objects that I want to either move or delete. And it's okay if they kind of butt up to certain areas here, but I don't want them to sort of like overcrowd or poke through, like we have something there poking through a little bit. So yeah, I just want to make sure that nothing is really directly interfering with geometry that we already have and that I don't necessarily want to alter or get rid of. And it is okay just to move things around as well. We don't necessarily need to delete them. So we can see that we have a few here that are interfering with those top boards. So yeah, I just want to make sure that nothing is like, if there's a board there, it's probably on like a flat surface. So I want to make sure that that doesn't have any, I'm just trying to think logically about this. I'm trying to think if this were an actual house, where there may be just like stucco, where there may be bricks sticking out. I'm just trying to sort of make sense of things as much as possible in my head. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, not super important that everything is just absolutely perfect, but I do kind of want things to make sense as much as possible, logically. And, again, we're creating a story in our heads for our models as we're creating them. So I want to sort of think about how things would work if this were real or close to being real. And then we have these little boards here. I may move this one in a little bit. So yeah, I don't want anything just like obviously going through another object. And in the case of a lot of times like this, if you want to take the time to do it, you can just come in and clean some of these up and delete them or move them around so they don't look like they're just going through each other like crazy like. But for the most part, I think this is a look that I like. Now I can certainly edit this more as I move forward. I think I'm fairly happy with the bricks as they stand right now. Now I do need to add some bricks to the chimney. I'll probably do a very similar process with using those same bricks. But for this video, I think that kind of is enough. So that's how we're going to add bricks to our house. Next, we'll add bricks to our chimney. We'll work on our chimney a little bit and maybe work on the top caps or sort of like, top parts of the house so we don't see these exposed this exposed part of the house up top.